For centuries, European farmers knew the signs. After a spring soaked in cold rain, summer heat would coax a strange transformation in their rye fields. Where golden kernels should swell, dark purple growths erupted instead. These were the sclerotia of Claviceps purpurea, hard fungal bodies the farmers called ergot, a corruption that replaced nourishment with poison. The process began invisibly. Spores from last year's infected crop settled on the rye's flowering heads. The fungus invaded the young grain, hijacking its development. It dissolved the soft tissue inside, weaving a dense network of filaments. In its place, the fungus consolidated its mass into those dark, horn-like protrusions, each one a compact storehouse of potent alkaloids. Harvest time arrived. Scythes swept through the stalks, and the brittle ergot bodies, now dried and black, shattered and mixed with the healthy grain. To a weary peasant's eye, it was just another blight to be tolerated. They bundled the contaminated harvest, unaware they were gathering the ingredients for a neurological storm that would, in time, cross an ocean. Across the Atlantic, in the damp lowlands of Salem Village, Massachusetts, the Paris and Putnam families planted their rye as the 1690s began. Their fields bordered marshes and creeks where morning mists clung to the stalks long after sunrise. This was perfect grain country, but the same moisture that fattened the kernels also created an invisible invitation. Throughout the growing season, a subtle corruption took hold. Where healthy rye should have borne golden heads, strange dark protrusions appeared instead. These ergot bodies, hardened and purplish-black, replaced the kernels. Farmers harvesting the crop might have noticed the odd, misshapen grains, but they simply bundled them with the rest, unaware of the potent chemistry locked inside. The contaminated harvest was stored in barns and cellars through the winter of 1691. The sclerotia, now dried and mixed with healthy grain, awaited the millstone. In that quiet, cold storage, the alkaloids within the fungus, ergotamine and its cousins, remained stable, a dormant poison bundled into the community's primary food source. The rye harvested from those damp fields was now stored in Salem's barns. As winter deepened, farmers brought their grain to the local mill. The heavy millstones turned, crushing the kernels into a coarse grey flour. Hidden within the harvest were the dark, hardened ergot bodies. They shattered alongside the healthy grain, their purple-black dust blending invisibly into the meal. In kitchens across the village, women mixed this flour with water and salt. They kneaded the dough, baked it in brick ovens, and produced the community's daily bread. No one saw the contamination. The ergot sclerotia had dissolved into the mix, releasing a complex cocktail of alkaloids, ergotamine, ergocristine, that would survive the oven's heat, baked solid into every loaf. Families gathered for their meals, breaking bread that smelled and tasted ordinary. With each bite, they ingested microscopic amounts of poison. The alkaloids began their silent work, constricting blood vessels and interfering with nerve signals. The toxic harvest was now inside them, a biological time bomb set to detonate in the bodies of Salem's most vulnerable. The contaminated flour from the Paris family's stores was baked into the dark, dense loaves that sustained them through that harsh winter. In the cramped parsonage, Reverend Samuel Paris's 9-year-old daughter Betty and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams first complained of a strange, creeping heat beneath their skin. Their fingers began to twitch uncontrollably, and their legs would buckle without warning, sending them crashing to the rough-hewn floorboards. Within days, the girls' spasms intensified into violent contortions. They would arch their backs until only their heels and heads touched the ground, their bodies seized by invisible forces. Between fits, they gasped out descriptions of terrifying spectres, shadowy figures that pinched their arms and whispered dreadful threats. Neighbours crowded into the small home, their horrified whispers filling the room as they witnessed the children's agony. The girls pointed at empty corners, screaming that a woman's spectre was flying there, or that a yellow bird, invisible to everyone else, was pecking at them. They described sensations of being choked and bitten, their skin burning as if touched by ice. Each detailed accusation poured fuel on the mounting panic within the parsonage, transforming a private medical mystery into a public supernatural crisis. The strange fits did not remain confined to the parsonage. Within weeks, the affliction seized other young women in Salem Village. Anne Putnam, Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott. They too collapsed into violent spasms, their limbs contorting as if pulled by invisible strings, their skin crawled with the same burning pins, and their eyes widened at spectres only they could see, filling neighbouring homes with the same terrified cries. Frightened families summoned the local physician, William Griggs. He arrived at a crowded household, his medical bag in hand, and bent over a girl rigid on the floor. He checked her pulse, examined her eyes, and felt for fever. He found no swelling, no rash, no sign of infection or injury that his 17th century knowledge could name. The illness defied every natural cause he knew. Straightening up, Griggs delivered his grim diagnosis to the anxious parents gathered around him. The girl's torments, he declared, bore the marks of an evil hand. His words, meant as a medical conclusion, dropped like a lit fuse into the community's tinder-dry fears. With natural science exhausted, the village now had a direction for its terror, the invisible world of witchcraft. The doctor's verdict of an evil hand demanded names. In the Paris household, under relentless questioning, the tormented girls finally pointed fingers. They named 3 women: Tituba, the family's enslaved Caribbean woman; Sarah Good, a destitute beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly bedridden widow. Each woman existed on the margins of Salem Village, their social vulnerability making them plausible targets for the community's mounting terror. Days later, the village meeting house swelled with onlookers for the preliminary hearings. As magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin took their seats, the afflicted girls collapsed before the bench. They contorted on the rough wooden floor, shrieking that invisible spectres were pinching their arms and biting their necks. They claimed the apparitions were the shapes of the 3 accused women, sent to torment them from afar. The magistrates leaned forward, demanding the accused explain these spectral attacks. Tituba, under pressure, confessed. She spoke of a tall man from Boston who commanded her to serve him of strange familiars and of signing a book. Her detailed, coerced testimony transformed a local mystery into a tangible conspiracy. It confirmed the villagers' deepest fears. Witchcraft was real, it was among them, and it had just begun. As the accusations multiplied, the legal proceedings shifted from the village meeting house to the formal court in Salem town. The spring air carried the scent of damp earth and new growth, but inside the courthouse a different kind of contagion spread. The judges, led by Lieutenant Governor William Staunton, made a fateful decision. They would accept testimony about attacks by invisible spectres as valid evidence. This spectral evidence meant a girl's claim that Sarah Good's spirit had choked her in the night held the same weight as witnessing an actual assault. The courtroom became a theatre of the unseen. Accusers would shriek, contorting as if seized by invisible hands, while the accused stood bewildered before the bench. A farmer might testify that the spectre of an imprisoned neighbour had appeared at his bedside, yet offer no proof beyond his own terrified account. The legal mechanism, designed for tangible crimes, now operated on visions and sensations. The crawling skin, the phantom bites, the spectral pinches described in vivid, convulsive detail by the afflicted. Those found guilty faced not the gallows yet, but the stone-walled jail. Dozens, men, women, the elderly, were crowded into its cold, dark cells to await trial. The prison, a solid block of Salem town, held them as the summer heat thickened. Inside, the air grew foul, while outside the proceedings accelerated. With spectral testimony unlocking every door, accusation became conviction, and the jail's population swelled with souls condemned by phantoms. The legal machinery, once set in motion, ground forward with terrible momentum. On a clear June morning, Bridget Bishop was led up the slope of Gallows Hill, the first to face the noose. The crowd that gathered below was a sea of anxious faces, many who had eaten the same rye bread, lived through the same strange winter, and now witnessed the deadly harvest of their collective fear. The hangings continued through the sweltering summer and into the crisp air of autumn. One by one, 18 more souls, mostly women, were escorted to the same tree. The proceedings became a grim ritual, the accused maintaining their innocence to the end, the afflicted girls sometimes convulsing in the crowd as each sentence was carried out, their own bodies still reacting to an unseen poison. Then came the case of Giles Corey, an elderly farmer who refused to enter a plea. The court ordered peine forte et dure, an ancient punishment. In a field near the jail, heavy stones were piled upon his chest. For 2 days he was pressed, his only words a gasped demand for more weight. His brutal death stood apart, a final physical crushing of dissent in a crisis born from invisible toxins and spectral visions. The panic, once confined to Salem Village, now rippled outward, its tendrils reaching the highest echelons of the colony. In late September, whispers began to circulate that the spectral fingers were pointing toward Lady Mary Phipps, the governor's own wife. The accusations, which had consumed the poor and the marginalized, now threatened to scorch the powerful. A cold dread settled over the magistrates who had once fueled the trials. The hysteria they had courted was now knocking at their own doors. That same autumn, a different harvest was brought in from fields that had baked under a drier summer sun. Farmers threshed their rye and found no trace of the sinister, dark purple kernels that had marred the previous year's grain. The ergot bodies, which thrived in the damp conditions of 1691, were absent. In Salem's kitchens, the new flour produced loaves of bread untainted by the potent cocktail of alkaloids that had silently infiltrated the community's food supply for months. As the unpoisoned bread was consumed, a remarkable change unfolded. The violent fits that had convulsed the accusers in the meeting house, the sensations of biting and pinching, began to fade. The spectral visions lost their terrifying clarity. The physical torment that had been interpreted as demonic assault simply subsided. The correlation was invisible to the community, but the timing was precise. As the toxic harvest ended, so too did the physiological symptoms that had powered the engine of accusation. As the accusations finally reached his own household, Governor William Phipps acted. In early 1693, he dissolved the special court that had fueled the panic. The legal machinery that had consumed Salem for a year ground to a halt. Prisoners who had languished for months in damp stone cells now heard the heavy iron doors swing open. They emerged into a changed world, blinking in the daylight. Families reunited in silence, their homes and reputations shattered. The community carried a deep collective wound. Neighbors had accused neighbors, children had condemned parents. The gallows on the hill stood empty. But the memory of the 19 who died there hung over every conversation. For generations, Salem grappled with the haunting question of what had truly happened. The official explanation of witchcraft slowly lost its power. Centuries later, in the 1970s, a scientist named Linda Caporael would pore over the old weather records and symptom descriptions, proposing a new toxic culprit hiding in the rye fields of 1692.